Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all say what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we start today on verse number 13. That is on page 18 of your hard copy. Arthasya nishchayo drishto vicharena hitoktitaha nasnanena nadanena pranayamashate va. The truth is confirmed through reflection on the words of the wise, and not by bathing in sacred rivers, nor by charity, nor by practicing breath control 100 times. So we're in that section of the verse where the author wants to emphasize that all of the things that we see as parts of our spiritual practice, every one of them may have a role to play, but all of these things are only indirectly related to the ultimate goal of knowledge. That knowledge alone can take us to that ultimate freedom. Because if the cause of bondage is ignorance, then that ignorance can be removed only through knowledge. And so that is why he says, not by bathing in sacred rivers. In many Hindus believe that bathing in some rivers which they see as sacred, the Ganges is the most famous among Hindus. But there are also some other rivers. There is the Yamuna, which is associated with the life of Krishna. Then there is Narmada in central India. So there are several rivers which are considered very sacred, and bathing in it is considered very meritorious. Now, the book doesn't deny the benefit of these practices, but says that simply if all that one does in life, he just goes and bathes in rivers, that's it, then that is no guarantee that they'll attain to that freedom. Similarly, not by charity. Now, charity is not bad. Charity is, of course, a good activity. We have to be charitable, we have to be compassionate, we have to help other people. Now, helping others can be done in at least two ways. One way is that I help others in order to get something in return. That may not necessarily be always a material return. If you give something to a hungry person, food to the hungry, or you offer shelter to the homeless, no, that's good. But we have to also examine our motives of what makes me do it. What am I expecting in return? Maybe I'm not expecting anything back from the person that I'm helping, but maybe I want to be recognized as a charitable person in my community. I want the recognition, appreciation, praise of my peers. Or maybe I have read that if I have done something good, then I will go and reap its rewards in heaven. So maybe I want to go to heaven. Maybe I want name and fame. And oftentimes we will get it. A lot of people who are charitable and they do receive social recognition. But there's another way of helping. And that is what Karma Yoga tells us. That if I can help someone without expecting any benefit for myself, without expecting anything in return, I just help others because it is good to help others. I do what is good just because it is good. I do something right just because it is right. Without any thought for oneself in that activity, then that kind of a selfless activity will purify my heart. And through purification of the heart, it will give me the clarity of mind, which will make me fit for knowledge, and that knowledge will set me free. So charity is helpful, but in an indirect way. Simply charity itself will not give me knowledge, because ultimately knowledge alone can set me free. That's what the book is telling us. Next, by practicing breath control. Now, breath control, the practice known as pranayama, the way you breathe in through the different nostrils and how the ratio between your in-breath and out-breath and so on. Now, that's a whole set of practices in themselves, which are beneficial, which are helpful. Many people have found health benefits from it. Many people have found it helpful for concentration of mind. Now, those benefits are not denied. But what is said is, merely by breathing in a certain way, that itself cannot give us knowledge. That can give us other benefits, but not knowledge. They can give us benefits which may indirectly help me in getting knowledge, but merely if all that I do throughout my life, just breathe in a certain way, or even breathe mindfully. Mindfulness is a very beneficial practice, very popular practice these days. But again, just being mindful can make my mind alert, can make my mind calm. But then the question is, what do I do after I acquire that alertness, after I acquire that inner peace? What happens then? So these can be helpful towards knowledge, but by itself, it's not enough. So the first part of the verse says, it's confirmed through reflection on the words of the wise. The words of the wise is meant the words of the scripture and of one's own teacher, or people whose judgment, whose knowledge about spiritual life we trust. So according to those words received from authentic sources, it is through those words and acting upon those words, living according to that advice, we can become free, not through any of these other ways. Verse 14. Adhikarinama shaste phalasiddhir visheshatah upaya deshakaladhyaha santyasmin sahakarinah. Success depends essentially on the fitness of the disciple. Other factors such as place and time are supplementary. Now, one important phrase here is fitness of the disciple. The word in Sanskrit is called adhikari. And there's a lot that can be said on this, but very briefly, whenever we undertake any study, any practice, how much success I will attain in that practice, how quickly I will attain it, will depend on how fit I am for that particular practice. Which is why oftentimes when we go to school, there will be a number of students in a class. We receive the same lessons, we may have the same professor or teacher, but not everyone does equally well. Some people are able to grasp the lesson better, are able to express themselves better, and they do better in their exams. Some may do moderately well, some may not do so well. So they all are at the same place and same time, same class, everything else is same, but the results are different. And the results are different because the fitness of every student is different. And therefore, one of the first things that as spiritual seekers we have to be mindful of is how fit I am for this practice. Now, fitness is not some kind of a fixed entity. We don't just drop from the skies with some fitness and kind of stuck with it. No, because the seeds of perfection are in the hearts of all of us, the seed of being the perfect student is also in the heart of all of us. So all that we can ask is how much of that potential perfection within me I am able to manifest in my life. And to the extent I'm able to manifest it, my ability to grasp the lesson, my ability to put it into practice, my ability to persevere with a certain practice will depend on that. And therefore, whatever fitness, whatever level of fitness we may have right now, we just have to look deeply in our heart, find out what aspects we are strong in what aspects we are weak, and then going forward, we need to preserve our strengths and try to eliminate our weaknesses one by one. That is how our level of fitness increases. Sometimes in books they speak about at least 3 broad categories of fitness. One is the best student, the student who is perfectly fit. In Sanskrit, that word for that is called Uttama. Uttama Adhikari, the best student. That student is so ready for enlightenment that all that the student has to do, or really, is just hear the words of the teacher. When the teacher tells the student, Tattvamasi, you are that infinite one. And if the student is ready for that knowledge, at once the student experiences, I am the infinite one. Aham Brahmasmi. And there's nothing more to be done. Just hear the truth, and it just, the knowledge in the heart completely flowers. So that's the topmost student, the best student, who is just ready, ripe for knowledge. The next level of students are those who are moderate, somewhere in the middle. So they are called Madhyama Adhikari. Now what does this kind of student do? When this student hears from the teacher that you are the infinite one, the student begins to ask and say, yeah, that kind of makes sense, or that kind of makes me feel good. But how can I be the infinite one? I'm this kind of mortal creature, and blah, 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 blah. And then, so just, this is kind of nice, but nothing that I don't feel right now that I am the infinite one. And I got lots of doubts and lots of questions. Perhaps that may be the stage in which most of us are, that we are able to appreciate these teachings. At some level they do make sense, but that's not where we are right now in our experience of life. At every moment of our life, we don't feel we are infinite. We don't feel we are perfect. Some people feel they are perfect, but they are not. We don't feel we are free. There are aspects in which we feel we are free. There are aspects in which we feel we are not free. And we have questions, we have doubts. So that state in which we are still grappling with our questions and doubts, that's the state of the moderate student. Then there is the third category called Kanishtha Adhikari. And that student is like below average. So that student, even when all the doubts are resolved, all the questions are answered, that student says, no, but still, it still doesn't make sense to me. I just can't. Now, as I said before, nobody's stuck in these categories. There is always scope for improvement. It's possible from that below average stage, if we work hard, if we do the things that need to be done, and what things need to be done will come later on in these verses, we can rise to that level of the average student. If we continue working harder still, we can go above average. A time will come when we might become just ripe for knowledge. And then all that we need to say is, well, you are the infinite one, I am the infinite one. But right now, even though we kind of keep reading these books, we keep hearing week after week, you are the Atman, you are infinite. And we say, yeah, okay, but still, it's intellectually stimulating. It hasn't really become a part of the experience. So that's essentially the goal for all study. That something that makes sense at the cerebral level must somehow descend into the heart and become our lived experience. Just like our present experience that we are human beings is not cerebral. We don't have to think, oh, it's because of this book says so, that is why I'm a human being. We don't have to even think about it, because that I'm human is a lived experience. That's who I am. But when we think of I'm the infinite spirit, it's still right here. So the goal is, as naturally, as effortlessly as I feel that I'm a human being, with that equal ease, equally natural when it becomes, when I say, I am the divine being, I am the perfect one, then the goal is reached. That's the state of enlightenment. The other important point in this verse is about factors such as place and time are supplementary. Now, supplementary means that being in the right place at the right time is helpful, but only if we are fit. We know that there are opportunities in life sometimes when, if we are somewhere at the right place at the right time, some chances may come to us, and contrarily, if we are in the wrong place at the wrong time, we might have to suffer as well. Now, in this instance, what the verse points out is that it's great if we are in the right place at the right time, but that benefit might not mean much if I'm not fit student. It's a little bit like I'm looking for a job, let us say, and I happen to go to some place and they are hiring people, and I didn't even know that they were hiring. So I'm at the right place, and it turns out that they are interviewing at this very moment. So I'm at the right time, I'm at that place. But actually I'm not qualified for the job that they are interviewing people. So being at the right place at the right time, but if there is no fitness, then it doesn't help much. On the other hand, if there is fitness, and if I happen to be at the right time at the right place somewhere, then I'll stand to gain. So that is what is meant by saying that factors such as place and time are supplementary. In our own lives, what we can be benefited by is to be always alert, to make use of the opportunities that come to us without taking any of these for granted. That's why sometimes when we start envying other people Sometimes when we look at others and say, oh, they are so lucky, or they have got some more opportunities than I have, that doesn't really help. Because oftentimes, if we look at our own lives, we might be able to see that there are lots of blessings we have received, but we have just taken them for granted. And so it's good to be aware of the opportunities life has already given us and be grateful for those opportunities. And then ask ourselves, whatever opportunities life has already given me so far, am I making the best use of those opportunities? Now, we don't know how this phenomenon works, but it seems reasonable to believe that if we make good use of the opportunities that come to us, whatever opportunities may come in the future, we'll be able to make better use of them. But if I just take my present opportunities for granted, don't even recognize them, then more opportunities might come and I may not be alert enough to recognize them. And so that's one important lesson to learn, to count one's blessings, so to speak. Verse 15. Ato vicharah kartavyo jidnyasoratmavastunaha samasadya daya sindhum gurum brahma viduttamam. Approaching a compassionate teacher who is the best among the knowers of Brahman, the seeker of knowledge should reflect on the nature of the Atman. The word jidnyasu in Sanskrit means one who seeks knowledge, the seeker of knowledge. So what should such a seeker do? Approaching a compassionate teacher who is the best among the knowers of Brahman. Now, what is this best among the knowers of Brahman? What does knowing Brahman mean? Knowledge is of at least two different kinds. One is indirect knowledge, the other is direct knowledge. Indirect knowledge is a knowledge that is mediated through our senses and the mind. And direct knowledge bypasses the senses and the mind, bypasses the intellect, bypasses everything, and just reveals itself. So, right now, even this few initial verses, we know, we have read, and we understand that how I see myself now may not be the right form of self-knowledge. That I'm not just this ordinary mortal human being, that in reality, I'm the infinite one. We may not have realized that yet. We may not have experienced that yet. But at least intellectually, we have read about it, we have heard about it, maybe we have thought about it a little. So we have the knowledge of Brahman, but that knowledge, as I said, is still very cerebral. Now, direct knowledge would be, I actually experience it. So, when it says the best among the knowers of Brahman, it means one who actually has experienced themselves as Brahman. One who the Gita in the second chapter describes as Sthita Prajna, the one who is established in that highest knowledge. The word for the seeker for knowledge, as I said, is jidnyasu. So that is one other thing we can ask ourselves. When I think of myself as a spiritual seeker, how seriously should I seek, should I take that term. Because sometimes when we use the word or a phrase very often, we just then kind of repeat it and stop thinking about it. But I think the phrase spiritual seeker has to be taken seriously, has to be taken to heart. So if I think of myself as a spiritual seeker, I need to at least occasionally ask myself, am I really seeking the Spirit? What am I really seeking in life? And that's a question we all have to ask. That even those in devotional language, when someone says, I'm a devotee, one can question even that word and says, am I really devoted to God? Just as in the case of this lower knowledge and higher knowledge, the same thing applies to devotion as well. Yes, that doesn't mean that let me put it this way. Devotion also has its levels. There may be kind of an average form of love for God, or there may be an intense form of love for God, or there may be such love for God that other than God one may not think of anything else. We know that when we have an intensely love someone, then the thought of that person never leaves our heart. It's always there. So when someone says, I believe in God, I have faith in God, I love God, I think it's legitimate to ask, how intensely do I love God? How intense is my faith? Because when someone says, I have faith in God, and I believe in God who is all-pervading, God is everywhere, do we really take that thing seriously? If God is everywhere, am I aware of that no matter wherever I go, that God is there? In fact, our life will be completely transformed if we just remember this one simple idea: God is present. Or a life will be completely transformed if I just try to never forget I am this infinite, pure, free being, and live and move and do everything in life with that awareness. Now, that's not easy. We'll forget that too often. And that's only natural to forget that. But instead of getting disappointed or giving up the practice, if one can say, even if I forget this highest truth, I will hold on to this spiritual identity as often as I can, as long as I can. And gradually with practice, that way of looking at oneself will become stabilized, will become strong. That's the idea. Verse 16. Medhavi purusho vidvan uhapoha vichakshanaha adhikari atmavidyayam ukta lakshana lakshitaha. One who is intelligent, learned, and skillful in thinking has the qualities needed to be a fit disciple for the knowledge of the Atman. We spoke about fitness earlier. So this verse and the next will give us very briefly what the essential qualities are to be a fit student for the study of Vedanta. So let's look at them one by one. One who is intelligent. The word here is medhavi. Literally, that means one who has medha. the word intelligence gets described in Sanskrit in many different ways. The word medha is very special in some ways. What these teachers have said is that, as in everything in life, there is a spectrum that when we say someone is intelligent, that doesn't mean the same thing in the case of everybody. That some are extremely intelligent, some are moderately intelligent, some are intelligent. So, medha, the word medha, means someone whose intelligence has become extremely refined. So it's the refined part of one's intelligence, something that helps us understand and perceive very subtle realities. Because there's such a thing as a gross perception and subtle perception. And so, one of the first things that in the Vedic system of education they did was first to develop this medha, develop this ability to understand things well. Swami Vivekachudamani once famously said that if I had to do my education all over again, I would not read any books at all. He said, first I would focus my attention entirely on the training of the mind. When the mind is fully trained, then I can use this great instrument that all of us have and put this trained mind on whatever subject I want to know and learn everything from it. And that was how it was in the older form of education when the books like this were written. When the student went to the teacher's home, of course, this was in the Vedic time, there were really no books at all. But the teacher did not even start giving lessons right away. All that the teacher gave the student was a prayer, a short prayer. And it's one of the most well-known prayers in the tradition. It's called the prayer Gayatri, the Gayatri prayer. The Gayatri prayer is nothing but the prayer to awaken this medha, to awaken this higher power of spiritual intuition. So only when this intelligence was refined, and then the teacher started giving lessons to the student. And we can see how different the system is now in which all of us have learnt and grown up. Now the emphasis is on books. Even little children, we just have homeworks and assignments and books. Not as much effort is put in training of the mind. Somehow we feel the more I read, that will automatically make me intelligent. But what about the mind? It's through the mind that I'm able to grasp and understand and interpret. And that's the part, because the system itself may not be very helpful to us in contemporary times, that is something we may have to do on our own. And so intelligence really means the one who has this refined part of the mind. Next, you see, intelligent and learned. The Sanskrit word for learned here is vidwan. Now, what does learning involve? It's not simply reading scriptures and books, but examining every idea that we read in that book, holding that idea in the heart with great care and curiosity. It's like when a child is given a new toy. You give a toy to a child, well, nowadays you say a game, a computer game, and tell them, don't read any instructions, just figure it out on your own. And so well, if it's a computer game or if it's a kind of a real physical toy, the curiosity and care with which the child will try to figure out how it is. It's also like when you get a new gadget at home. Some people will start, everyone has a different way of dealing with these things. So some people will first take the manual and read it well. Others will not even touch the manual. They'll just take it and try to figure out on their own how to operate that gadget. Only if they are stuck somewhere, then they might go to the manual. Same thing we need to do whenever we hear any new idea or a different idea. Not simply jump to conclusions, not simply react with our inbuilt biases and prejudices, but hold that idea carefully. Try to examine it in different directions. Try to see what it means, what it doesn't mean, what are the different implications behind it. And that is what that next adjective says. Skillful in thinking. The Sanskrit is uhapoha vichakshanaha. So this skill is just taking an idea and examining it, looking at its pros and cons, understanding it. That is the skillful way of thinking. Everyone thinks. We have got a mind and we all think. But not everyone is considered a big thinker socially. How come when everyone can think, everyone is not considered a thinker? And that is because those people whom we designate as thinkers are people who are able to think in an organized way, in a disciplined manner. All of us have ideas, but if those ideas are not arranged in a proper way, unless we know how each idea in the mind relates to every other idea, that kind of a haphazard collection of ideas is not very helpful. It's like you have lots of things in your room. They are just spread out everywhere. Even if you want something, you do not know where it is. Not very helpful. But even if I have a limited number of things and have organized them in a particular way, just living in that room is such a joy because you know everything where it is. Things are where they should be. That's how our mind should be. If we can think about our mind as the inner room, and every idea that I either read about somewhere or hear about somewhere, I have to figure out that if this is the idea worth keeping, then what place should it have in my mind? How is this idea related to other ideas that I already have? And if I find that this idea is useless or it's not worth keeping, I need to have some kind of a trash basket, somewhere I can trash them. Otherwise, our head will be just mixed up, jumbled with some extraordinarily wonderful ideas and some terrible ideas. And it doesn't help. So, skillfulness in thinking means knowing how every idea in my head is related to every other idea. When that happens, I'll be able to think in a disciplined way. And that kind of thinking will lead to increase in wisdom. Knowledge, if you want to distinguish between being intelligent and wise, we could probably make that kind of a distinction. That only when I know a lot, but I also know how these things are related, how they form a harmonious picture in my mind, then that leads to wisdom. Otherwise, knowing a lot just means is being confused a lot also. That's the problem. And so we may not always realize it, that like buying too many things. And if you have bought something and then not everyone is able to say, oh, I don't need this or useless, let me throw it. You have bought it, you have paid money for it. So even if you don't need it, you say, okay, let's put it in the basement, put it in a garage somewhere, but you can't throw it. Now, with regard to material objects, it might be a little bit easier to throw away what we don't need. But with regard to ideas, that's tough. If I put some nonsensical, useless thoughts and ideas in the head, although I did say we can have a trash box or something, it's just not possible. You want to forget something, throw away an idea. Maybe in Harry Potter books you could probably take a memory or throw away something. But in real life you can't do it. You're just kind of stuck with that trash. Now, the trash that is already within our heart, in our head, we have to deal with it at some point in life. But the first thing that we can do is stop putting more trash there. As they say that if you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. So as Vedanta students, we have to, it's not just about reading books. The ideas can come to us in many different ways. Through the company that we keep, through the television program, movies that we see. So all of these venues are great. I mean, even some movies, some television programs can be extremely helpful. That can be very enlightening. But we have to be selective about what ideas we allow the mind to go in. Just as people who are conscious of health are very selective about what kind of food they want to eat, what kind of food they want to avoid. Because we know that the health of the body is important, so I must eat healthy food. But the health of the mind is important too. I should feed my mind with healthy ideas, positive ideas. So that awareness will be very helpful. And that is what is meant by these adjectives that I used. The student has to be intelligent, learned, skillful in thinking. Such a student has qualities needed to be a fit disciple for the knowledge of the Atman. So the next verse, and another verse that will come later on, verse number 42, will also give more qualities, the kind of qualities we need to develop in our own life in order to be fit student. And we'll take that up when we meet next week. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, feel free to ask. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji. I'm a very curious person, and I like to learn about many things and to experience many ideas. And to do that, I like to experience them fully. I like to investigate them deeply. And not all of them are good ideas, as you say. How do I reconcile this curiosity and the joy that I find in exploring many ideas with this advice to not allow ideas that will just stick around and ruin things into my mind?
Good, thank you. I think that's a good question, because that's the kind of dilemma many of us may have. I think curiosity is a great quality. It's good to be curious. But it's also helpful to be aware of the fact that time and energy are limited. So if my curiosity is not controlled in some way, by control I mean if my curiosity is not channeled in a particular direction, I may know a lot about a lot of things, But because the time and energy are limited, one has to at some point make a choice. Do I want to know a little bit about everything or a lot about a little bit this thing? And it's something like Ramakrishna gives the example of someone who was in need of water. And in those early days, there wasn't any machinery to do the dig bore wells. So people had to go and physically start digging to get water. And so they thought, well, having a well will be helpful as a source of water. So a person starts digs for about 10 feet or so, and finds some rocks and stones and says, no, I don't think any water is here. Then let me try some other spot. And digs the other spot for another 10 feet and finds similarly rocks and stones. So digs in 10 different places, about 10 feet each, and finds water nowhere. And Ramakrishna said, if this person had stuck to one place and dug, using the same energy, would have gone up to 100 feet and maybe perhaps gotten water there. So that's the kind of a trade-off that we have. The curiosity, if it's the more spread out it is, I won't have the time to go in, know anything deeply enough. So it's again a choice that we have to do. How much deep do I want to go, or how much broad I want to be? Yeah.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Swamiji, how might we build the internal strength and fitness if through the grace of God, if we start to get a glimpse of some knowledge going from the brain to the heart, just small glimpses, but those unfamiliar experiences create a lot of fear instead of comfort. How might we build the strength to accept and see the true reality as is, even in those glimpses, without feeling fear in the heart?
Yeah, good. Fear sometimes comes when higher glimpses come to us and we are not yet ready for them. In Vivekananda's own life, he was probably just 9 or 10 years old, and we read that sometimes along with his friends, his biography says these children used to play at meditation. So they would sit and meditate. He wasn't formally instructed, as far as we know, but he would just like to sit and meditate. So one day, just as a very young boy, Vivekananda, his name was Narendranath, sat in a room, and because of his readiness, even at that young age, he one day entered into a deep state of meditation. And then an image of a holy person whose whole personality was shining appeared before him. He was all alone in the room, just a 10-year-old kid, and suddenly this person appears. He was frightened. He ran out of that room. And then after some time, he realized, and he says, I go back, and then of course that vision had disappeared. And later on he revealed that that was in fact his first experience when the Buddha appeared before him, when he was just a little boy. And clearly he wasn't ready for that, and therefore he just ran out of fear. Even about 10 years later, when he went to Ramakrishna, during one of his early visits, Ramakrishna himself was so happy, so delighted to see how pure and fit a student he was. And in his eagerness, Ramakrishna goes and just touches him on the back. And Vivekananda later described just this mystical touch of this great teacher. He says the whole world around started melting, so to speak. Everything, all the distinctions went, all the forms disappeared. And he was terrified. He just shouted, "What are you doing to me? I've got my parents at home." And then Ramakrishna smiles and then patted him and said, all right, all will happen in due time. So yes, it does happen. Sometimes we might get these, what the poet called the intimations of immortality, the glimpses of this higher life. Sometimes we might get excited, sometimes we might be happy, sometimes we might be terrified, sometimes we may not know what it all means. All of these reactions are possible. And that is where, as these verses that we saw today, the words of the wise can help. The guidance that we get from scriptures or from teachers can help us navigate our way on the path on which they have been before and we are just starting. So it's a natural reaction. Yeah.
Swamiji, how does the Guru see that a student has achieved some level of medha, and how can we try to look for that in ourselves?
How does it?
How does a Guru see that a student has achieved some level of refined intelligence, and how can we look for that in ourselves?
How does the Guru see? Only the Guru will know. But the student, we can see in our own hearts that the level of each, let me put it this way, books like the scriptures like the Vivekachudamani or the Gita or any other revealed text, they don't have just one meaning. We might understand the language, we might understand Sanskrit, or we may understand English where it's translated. But it's good to know that whatever understanding that we have of a particular verse, to take it as a provisional understanding. And then we might discover that the more we keep on ruminating on the meaning of the text, the deeper and deeper levels of that meaning will become revealed to us. Now that is one sign that the medha is awakening. If I read a text now, and even after 10 years I read it, and I don't see anything other than what I had seen 10 years earlier, that means my medha is kind of stuck somewhere. But if I keep on, that's why a repeated study is recommended, because every time you read, even if you have read a passage you might have read 100 times before, a certain day, a certain time might be the way you suddenly say, oh my God, I never realized that this verse had such depth of meaning. So that's one sign the student may know that their level of maturity is improving. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Swamiji, in one of the verses that we just said was time and place are supplementary. That means, but isn't it where being at the right place at the right time is also important? Because sometimes you hear from the past of the sages who have kind of attained certain things only by being in the right place at the right time with a guru or disciple, or how they kind of like sort of got there.
Yeah, so that's what is meant by saying they are supplementary. That if I'm at the right place at the right time and also fit, then that place and time had benefited in some way. But if I'm at this right place and right time but not fit, then probably it doesn't make too much difference. For instance, take the case of Ramakrishna himself. Now, there were all these people, Vivekananda of course, but many of these first generation of his devotees and disciples who went to him, learned from him, their lives were transformed. They became saints. They became enlightened. But in that temple complex where Ramakrishna lived, there were a lot of people there. Not everyone who was at the right place, they did go to Dakshineshwar. Many of them did see Ramakrishna, but they were not fit, they were not ready at that point for that highest knowledge. So even after being there at that time, their lives just remained as they were. And so that's the difference between, or the role that place and time play. That primary is always the fitness, how ready I am for a teaching at any given time. It's like this, as I mentioned earlier, if the student is fit, the teacher simply has to say, Tattvamasi, you are the infinite one. The student is free. But if I'm the below average student, the teacher might say, you are the infinite, you are the infinite, you are the infinite. And like, okay, now I'm feeling hungry, I need to go and have a cup of coffee. That's how it'll happen. Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Sorry for my second question, but time and place, just going back to what he just asked. So do time and place, I know it said it's supplementary, but in a sense, like, do they just not matter? Because what is even right time or right place? Like, we could have in the poorest family, someone who just is extremely fit and has that knowledge, or in the wealthiest, like there are just so many diversities. So like, does time, place, or karma to an extent just not matter if the person just becomes fit and strong to receive it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not about rich and poor. It means that, for instance, now if Ramakrishna, who is seen by many as an incarnation, when he was living in a human form, he was in a certain place. He did live in a certain time. So if someone who lived in Calcutta at that time and said, oh, if I had only known he was there, I might have been able. And a lot of people did feel later on when they came to know, oh, what a great person he was, and I never got a chance to meet him. But there were others who got a chance to see him and meet him, but had no change in their heart. So in that sense, you could say a right place or a right time would be somewhere where potentially it could have been helpful if only there was a fitness for the student. And yes, and the other point you mentioned is correct. If someone is fit for a highest knowledge, then every place is the right place, every time is the right time. That's also the right way to look at it. Yeah. Okay, so we will stop here today, and we will continue next week. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday, we will continue with our study of the Gita in the satsang at 11. On Saturday, we'll have the weekly meditation at 6 o'clock. And next Wednesday, we will continue this study. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on you.